future NFL stadiums being built. So I was really surprised at the quality of some of the NFL stadiums that are currently like in the roster. Like the SoFi Stadium is just insane. I really want to get out there. I was in LA a few years ago, and unfortunately the football season was over at that time because the SoFi Stadium, I think it's like what, $5 billion worth of stadium, just incredible. But also the Allegiant Stadium, amazing. The Mercedes one in Atlanta. There's so many cool ones. But it made me think, so what's currently in the plans? Because, usually with new stadiums, they get bigger, they get cooler, usually more expensive. So what have we got coming in the next sort of 5 to 10 years?
All right, ladies and gentlemen, this is going to be my official 2024 update on future NFL stadium projects, whether it's a big renovation, it's a rebuild. These are only like multi-billion or at least $1 billion projects.
Wow. This looks like it's like a dolphin or something. I don't know. Like, I love the blue, like the shimmering blue lights.
I'm going to be discussing a lot of new stadiums. They're going to be a huge thing in the NFL in the late
and the chrome. This is just beautiful.
2020s. We do have one stadium under construction, the early stages of construction right now, and another one starting soon. I'm sure you guys have heard about both of those. I'm going to quickly go over them. But before I do that, I do want to talk about, in terms of a timeline, possibly the new Everbank Stadium renovation, which is basically a new stadium when you look at what they plan to do in Jacksonville. Now, this could potentially happen in 2026 and 2027. They were originally talking about 2025 and 2026 when this stadium would be renovated, and that would cause the Jaguars to leave possibly Jacksonville, maybe play in Orlando, Florida at Camping World Stadium. This is a huge renovation. We'll see if it gets funded. Right now, they're trying to get 50% private, 50% public. The public doesn't seem to want to budge. $1.4 billion just for the stadium.
Why does the public have to pay for a stadium being built? Like, shouldn't it be the owners of the team who pay for that? Like here in England, if you want to build a stadium, it's usually all that money is coming from the ownership because they're the ones who are going to benefit really from ticket sales and stuff like that. Like, why is it that, the taxpayer has to pay for stadiums in America?
They are adding a translucent roof onto it with a sleek chrome futuristic exterior along with interior upgrades as well. We're not sure on the timeline. A lot of this has to do with funding, but possibly the Jaguars leaving Everbank Stadium because it's going to be renovated and moving somewhere else for 2 years, maybe starting in 2025 or 2026. I'm leaning towards possibly 2026, 2027, where they would be playing elsewhere, depending on when this
Gorgeous, though. I mean, this is stunning.
funding actually happens. And if it doesn't happen, we could be looking at the Jaguars possibly discussing some type of relocation. I don't think we're there yet, but right now, this is what they've pitched to save Everbank Stadium, one of the most decrepit stadiums in the NFL. This would be a huge renovation that could be coming. Moving on to a new stadium that is confirmed will be opening in 2027.
Wow. So I love how different the last one and this one are, yet this one is so beautiful in its own way. It kind of looks a bit like like the Colosseum in Rome. It's got that real, almost like rugged look to it.
Is new Highmark Stadium. This is the Bills' new stadium that people have been complaining about because it does not have a roof. That was probably the biggest decision when it comes to the development of this stadium. There were original models to replace the former Highmark Stadium because it is so old, and many of the original models and renderings included a roof, but they decided because it is, Buffalo, New York, they want the elements, they want the snow. It does seem like a Bills game is getting postponed at least once a year because of these ridiculous squalls that develop over the lake and you get this crazy lake effect snow. But either way, they will not have a roof. They're going more with a European design to where there will be overhangs that will cover a lot of the fans from the bad elements, and they will also be able to trap the heat in the stadium as it rises. So they're hoping it'll heat up the stadium, and there you can see the exterior exterior and the interior. It is a nice stadium.
It's very nice. I like it quite a lot. It's more simplistic than the other one, but there's something, to me that's really attractive about, it doesn't have too many, finicky like features, but it still looks really modern.
And it is going to cost a little bit over budget. They're projecting now around $1.75 billion. The original estimate was around $1.4 billion, but that's opening in 2027, and they've already broken ground on it, and they're working on digging out the foundation right now and building that area. They do have multiple years to build this, so it's in a very early stage in terms of its construction. Opening in 2028, it is new Nissan Stadium, home of the Tennessee Titans. Now, this is
I'm not sure about the exterior here. It looks a bit too much like an office building, don't you think?
Stadium that I expect to be hosting a Super Bowl by 2030 or 2031. It is the new design, the translucent roof, a very unique exterior that kind of reminds me of a futuristic mansion, the way it lights up, but the interior, the seating configuration certainly is similar to Allegiant Stadium with the bigger upper deck going around. This is opening in 2028. They have not broken ground on it.
Wow, I mean, yeah, it really doesn't look like a stadium from the outside.
And it will cost around $2.2 billion. It is fully closed, translucent roof. They're going to be trying to host huge events at it, Final Fours, maybe multiple Super Bowls, and that is the other confirmed stadium that is happening in the NFL. And now we're going to kind of talk about speculation, certain stadiums that I think are coming, that we've heard certain rumors on. The first one is the new potential Browns stadium. Now, this is not 100% confirmed that the Browns are building a new stadium. They still are talking with the city of Cleveland, possibly to renovate the Cleveland Browns Stadium and the entire lakefront. It would be around a $1.5 billion project, I would estimate. So they could do that and put an overhang on Cleveland Browns Stadium. That's one of the big issues that they're dealing with right now. The Browns originally built this stadium back in 1999, but it was kind of a rushed build to get it done because they got the team back. And the stadium, I think it's a solid stadium, but I understand if they want to host big events, they are going to need a dome.
Hold on, so is this the new... Like, this is what it's going to look like? I mean, it just seems... There's nothing sort of futuristic about it. Or is this what it currently looks like?
So right now they're stuck between maybe a renovation or a brand new stadium, and Brook Park, Ohio, which is 10 miles south of Cleveland, right next to the Akron-Hopkins International Airport, is being talked about. Jimmy Haslam, the Browns owner, bought around 170 acres right next to the airport. Could they potentially build a translucent roof dome stadium there? I think it's possible. The Browns recently put out a statement basically admitting that they want a dome, they want to host a Super Bowl, they want to host a Final Four, so it seems like it's trending in that direction. And right now you do have the ownership of the Browns trying to get the city of Cleveland to bid against other cities like Brook Park to see where he can get the best deal possible. Seems like he's shopping right now to get the best deal because Cleveland has a hardline stance about not really wanting a new stadium. Also, if they do...
Seems like there's a lot of resistance from the public against either the new stadium in total or just the funding of the stadiums. Is it due to the cost? I'm sure the cost must be a big factor here. Having to spend $1 billion more, out of the public purse.
A renovation, a stadium renovation. The Browns are very likely going to have to play elsewhere for at least one season, depending on how extensive the renovation is to the surrounding area along with the stadium. So I would say right now there's a pretty good chance the Browns do get a dome stadium, but who really knows? It could just be a renovation possibly happening. This is a rough timeline. 2027 to 2030, sometime in there. If they're building a new stadium, let's just say at Brook Park, maybe it breaks ground in 2026.
What's the capacity here? This looks big. I mean, this has got to be at least... What's the capacity for the Browns Stadium? I mean, this looks to me like at least 55,000. Looks between sort of 50 and 60,000.
This is all rough stuff. If it broke ground in 2026, it might be able to open by 2029 or 2030, but that is the Browns situation. We do have the Chicago Bears in a very similar situation as the Browns. They got the massive Soldier Field renovation in the early 2000s. It was over $1 billion for that, but we know they've been planning their new stadium for a while now, possibly moving to the suburbs like maybe the Browns are doing with Brook Park. They've been talking with Arlington Heights. They've been talking with other suburban cities surrounding Chicago, and the latest rumor on the Bears is possibly a lakefront stadium, not necessarily.
I do like lakefront stadiums. Like, for some reason, whenever a stadium is backing into the water, like you've got water just sort of around it or next to it, just makes it look so pretty, doesn't it? It just looks great.
In Chicago, but in one of the suburbs right along the lakefront. That's the most recent rumor. They could always go back to Arlington Heights. They already bought 200 acres worth of land there, and they did demolish the racetrack. But what we do know is the Bears, there's like a 99.9% chance they get some type of translucent roof dome stadium. Maybe it's retractable, but I doubt it. And Roger Goodell did come out at the Super Bowl and say, you know, we want the Bears to get a dome stadium. We want them to be able to host big-time events. If the Bears do get a dome stadium, they're virtually going to be guaranteed to host the Super Bowl in the early 2030s.
How much, if a city gets to host a Super Bowl, like let's say, I don't know, the Green Bay Packers get to host the Super Bowl at their stadium, how much money does that area where the stadium is, how much revenue can they expect to generate from all the fans coming in, staying in hotels, you know, buying food, entertainment? Like, is it like financially lucrative to get to host a Super Bowl?
And I would imagine a timeline on that, considering it seems like this stadium project is further along than the one in Cleveland. They're going to be getting a new stadium. Soldier Field is done. The question is, where is it located and when are they able to start construction on it? I would imagine we get renderings, we get something this summer, and maybe they break ground on it in 2025, possibly opening it by 2028 or more likely 2029 or 2030.
Wow. I mean, this looks... I've never seen anything like this. Like, if this is truly what it looks like, crazy.
Based on the timeline there. And then these are just more speculation based on where the stadium currently is in terms of their life. We do have Arrowhead Stadium, and my expectation when it comes to Arrowhead, it's very old, but it is legendary, opening in 1972.
Very unique with how spread like this stadium is. Like, it looks almost like a dinner plate. It's just like, but these guys here, they're very far from the field of play.
You see the Truman Sports Complex. You have Kauffman Stadium right next to it. Kauffman Stadium very likely will be demolished by 2028. The Royals are building a new ballpark, or at least they want to, and they are deep in the process of negotiations to build a new ballpark in downtown Kansas City. So that will give the Chiefs and enable them a lot more room once they tear down the Royal Stadium. You don't need all that extra parking. I'm guessing there will be a decently built up football stadium district right next to Arrowhead. And the bigger question with Arrowhead is, will they add a roof on top of Arrowhead? It would be very hard based on the upper deck design of Arrowhead.
Because the upper deck design is so wide. The roof would need to be just gigantic.
Basically have to build an entire new support system because there's no way that upper deck would be able to support a retractable roof. I think it's probably unlikely, but it is something to note considering how old Arrowhead is and the fact that they very likely will be at least getting a renovation to the exterior of their stadium with the Royals moving out. It's going to enable them to have more land and to renovate that area. That's probably going to be happening around 2030, I would say, based off of the timeline of the Royals leaving. The next stadium that could be getting a renovation or maybe just demolished outright, Bank of America Stadium, home of the Carolina Panthers. Now, they've done some assessments on it. They've talked about adding some type of translucent roof. I highly doubt any of that is happening. They did do some type of half-hearted renovation to the exterior of it for the MLS team, I believe. I am guessing that Charlotte will be getting a new football stadium that is a dome stadium.
How long do the stadiums typically last in the NFL? Because it seems like teams, you know, after say 30 years, like they build new stadiums. Whereas here, the stadiums last quite a long time. You know, typically a stadium will last at least sort of 50, 60 years in the Premiership, like the Premier League football. I suppose maybe the NFL has a bit more money to spend. The teams are maybe more valuable.
That is my expectation. I do not think it's worth it to dump $600 million into Bank of America Stadium. I would rank it as one of the 5 or 6 worst stadiums. You would have to reconfigure the upper deck, probably take out a lot of seats in the upper deck and put in party decks. It would not look good. I just think the design of it is really bad, and they're better off biting the bullet and putting up a new stadium that's going to last them around 40 to 50 years at least, and at that point they can try and get a Super Bowl and other major events. So I would expect maybe in the late 2020s, early 2030s. Again, there's been some dialogue. It's been light dialogue, but there has been dialogue of possibly either a huge renovation to this stadium or just building a new stadium outright.
Yeah, I get why you'd want to renovate. It's just so much cheaper. You know, it's easy to say, oh, just bite the bullet, but there's a big difference between 600 mil and 2 billion, right?
We will see. The next one is FedEx Field. So This is a stadium project that's been just completely grinded to a halt and delayed. There were original renderings on a new then Redskins Stadium, because that's what they were called, back in 2016, 2017 with Dan Snyder. They knew that FedEx Field was so horrible and decrepit. They ruined it with more renovations. It's terrible. It's the worst stadium in the NFL. But because of the Dan Snyder situation, ownership situation, a new stadium has just been completely delayed. And all of these renderings are out of date. They're not happening. The new ownership, Josh Harris, they're going to have to get together and talk about a new stadium, probably a translucent roof stadium. I know their last one that they pitched was a color-changing translucent roof. It's probably going to be something like that, I would say. And I'm guessing maybe the early 2030s. They did talk about doing some very light renovations to FedEx Field. Just
to be fair, I think that you could renovate this. I don't think you need to tear it down completely, because the structure isn't too complex. You could add a lot of things. You know, you could make the inside look very, very nice. I don't think you need to tear this one down. What do you think?
To try and save it for at least 5 or 6 years, but it's only an investment of about $50 million. It's a very small renovation. FedEx Field at this point is completely dilapidated, and their stadium situation, the NFL cannot like what happened there, because technically, I mean, they started planning for a new stadium back almost 8 or 9 years ago. They could have already had a new stadium at this point, and they haven't even broken ground, and we don't even have new renderings on what the stadium's actually going to look like. So this project is just completely dead in the water, but it is going to happen. It has to happen because of how bad FedEx Field is, and I would imagine the Commanders would possibly get a new stadium in the early 2030s. We should get more news about a potential stadium project for the Commanders this coming year. Next, we do have Raymond James Stadium, located in Florida. Now, you look at Raymond James Stadium, there's nothing great about it, there's nothing terrible about it, but this is just off the basis of a lot of these stadiums in Florida adding either a roof or a massive overhang.
But does Florida get a lot of rain? Isn't Florida sunny the majority of the time, or the weather's pretty decent? Why do you need a roof if it rarely rains? Or am I completely wrong? Because I've only been to Florida when it was summer.
And that's what I would expect from Raymond James Stadium. When it comes to Tampa Bay, this could be a situation where there's no upgrades to the stadium for the next 10 years, maybe 12 years. The stadium gets more and more decrepit, and then it comes to a point where it's you either need to build a new stadium or we're moving this team. Now, I'm not saying right now Tampa Bay is going to be relocating the Buccaneers, but I can just feel this is going to be a weird situation in the future with Raymond James Stadium. It is not the worst stadium right now. It's very bland, but just in terms of Florida, the type of weather that they get, a lot of these teams, even FSU football is talking about adding a massive overhang to their stadium. We saw what Hard Rock did. We're seeing what the Jacksonville Jaguars are trying to do. We're seeing what maybe Camping World Stadium might try and do with an overhang as well. I would say Raymond James Stadium, possibly in the future, could be getting a big renovation.
I mean, right now, it looks okay to me. There's something quite charming about the simple look of this. You know, it's very angular. It doesn't really have that round look on the inside. I think it's quite nice.
The next one is Paycor Stadium, home of the Cincinnati Bengals. Now, this is a stadium that they talked about doing a renovation pretty extensively back in 2018, 2019. It never happened. they're kind of stuck between a rock and a hard place. They're in a similar situation as the Browns in terms of, do they do a big renovation, maybe spend $500 million, or do they build a brand new stadium outright and spend around $1.2 billion. There has not been a ton of recent dialogue on Paycor Stadium and a potential renovation, so there's not much I can really speculate on what they plan to do. Next, we do have MetLife Stadium, so this is more of a Jets situation. We would obviously expect the Giants to remain at MetLife. It's kind of like I would say it's more their stadium than it is the Jets. The question is, and this was a project that was proposed back in the...
I do think that the Jets and the Giants should have their own stadiums. Like, why is it that they share a stadium? Like, is it space?
Early 2000s, part of it was for New York City possibly getting the Olympics. The Jets are on 5-year leases. Could they possibly try and build their own stadium?
They should.
We know about West Side Stadium. That was the stadium that was proposed for the Jets and the Jets only in New York City back in 2007. Could the Jets try and get out of a 5-year lease? Because, you know, the lease is in increments when it comes to MetLife. It's every 5 years it has to be renewed. So the Jets at any point could say, you know, MetLife, we can see the writing on the wall with this stadium. It is already obsolete and it was built in 2010. So basically...
Wow, how is it obsolete already? How? It's only 15 years old.
The Giants are going to be forced to stay at this stadium until at least 2040, 2045, just because it's the precedent of a stadium lifespan. You're not going to leave the stadium, you know, after just 20 years, but because you have multiple teams there, the Jets could try and get out and build their own stadium. That is a lot of speculation, but we will see on that. And then you also do have Alcashore Stadium, home of the Pittsburgh Steelers. They're in a very similar situation the Browns and the Bengals are in, but apparently they are perfectly fine with their stadium for now. Personally, I think the Browns stadium is just better than the Steelers stadium. It's kind of funny that the Browns are planning to get a new stadium and the Steelers are happy with theirs. I just think the Browns stadium is better, but either way, it seems like they're fine with their stadium and there's not going to be a major renovation, at least not for the next 5 or 6 years. Either way, guys, that is going to do it for this video. Make sure you follow me on X. Link.
Very, very interesting. It does seem like the amount of stadiums under construction in the NFL is higher than in the Premier League. Like, teams maybe, I think also because the city, you know, puts some of the budget up for the stadiums in America, you know, the cost is lower for the team. So maybe it makes it easier for the teams to renovate and rebuild their stadiums. I still want someone to explain to me why the city helps out with the stadium cost. Is it because of the jobs it creates? Like, why is that? Thanks for watching, guys, and I'll see you in the next one.